Sit!
Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds Podcast. I am your host, Garrett Price, with my good friend, Matt O'Hara.
Hey.
Once again, no Rich Dotson for this show. He's out tanning the toes, but he will be back next week. Not the whole feet, just the toes.
Just the toes. This is the important part. It's fine.
Yep. Oh, man. We have our Cells episode. And, Matt, I don't know about you. I personally, maybe this is a weird character flaw thing. I don't know. I love bye episodes because it feels very optimistic and hopeful. I don't like sell episodes because I feel so mean. Like, this guy sucks. He's overrated. Like, is that just a me thing?
It is a you thing. I actually am the exact opposite. which I'm not like a negative person.
No, you're not.
But I just have a hard time with the buys. Like, I'm like, I don't want that guy. I don't want that guy. I got the guys I want. Fine. I don't want to buy anyone else's junk. I got my own stuff that I like. I don't want anybody's crap. But for me, sells, it just makes sense. Like, sometimes there's peaks in value. I can like a guy and sell him. I can do those things.
I will say sells feel easier to do. I just feel mean. Like, but it is easier to like spot a profile and be like, that feels wrong. Like, that shouldn't work.
I agree. I mean, I just see ADP for me is like the easiest indicator of a guy like that needs to be sold. If everyone loves this guy and I'm just like, I like him, but I see 10 guys that I like just the same as him, then that's when it's time to move on and kind of make a move on some of these guys. So sells always, for me, I leave them for last because I know it'll be a quick job, and I'm one of those people that like I like to do the crap that you don't want to do first because to me I'll never do it. Like, if I do it the other way around, I just do the easy stuff first. I'll never do the hard stuff. And then you just have a whole list of hard stuff to do. You got to tackle the tough stuff first, the buys, and then you just finish up. It's just like sweeping the stuff into the dustpan after you did the whole room. That's all the buys. You swept the entire room, and then you just put it in the dustpan. That's the sells for me.
That's the sells. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy. Put it in the dustpan, throw it away.
Look at you with the metaphors while Rich is gone.
Somebody's got to do it. I mean, without him here making crazy metaphors, somebody's got to do weird metaphors. I don't even know where that one came from. Maybe
I will say his national anthem one last week was pretty good.
I forget what that one. He's made so many.
He said something to the.
You expect me to remember one of those?
There are a lot of Richisms that are hard to remember. But he was talking about Matt Canada's offense. And he was like, Matt Canada's offense was like the national anthem. You might not know all the words, but you can at the least hum along because you know that too. I was like, that's pretty good.
That makes sense. Okay. I remember that one now. But like, honestly, he does a new one every week. It's like in one ear, out the other.
Well, I think it stuck out because that was one of the ones where I was like, oh yeah, I get it. Whereas I was like, wait, what? What was that? I have no idea.
Usually when he's when he's off on a tangent like that, I'm looking at notes or something for our next guy down the line. That's why I miss him.
Oh man, good times. All right. Well, before we get into ourselves, let me tell you what's going down at Underdog Fantasy. Guys, it is time for Best Ball Mania 5. Don't miss out on the huge $1.5 million first place prize for only a $25 entry. This year, Best Ball Mania 5 will pay out $15 million in total prize money. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and deposit at least $10 using promo code NERDS. Underdog will match your first deposit up to $100. So that means if you put in 20, they'll put in 20. You put in 50, they'll put in 50, all the way up to $100. Test your skills against the best and try to win that $1.5 million first place prize at Best Ball Mania. don't forget, use promo code NERDS at Underdog Fantasy. All right, let's get into it. Matt, who is your first super easy for you sell?
So my first super easy for me sell is sell Tank Dell. Right now he's sell the Dell, man. Dude, I'm getting rid of my Dell. How about that? Just like Rich, sometimes they bomb. 57.
Hey, it happens.
57.75 is his ADP right now, which is wide receiver 21, according to the ADP. And, he's 24 years old. He's going to be playing this year at 25. He turns 25 in October. So last year he was an older rookie coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And he's not a guy I want to start this off as, we talked about it kind of before. He's not a player I dislike.
Sure.
I just think right now wide receiver 21 is too high for him to be coming off the board. And I think there's just an opportunity for you to kind of cash in and maybe not even upgrade. I'm okay making a lateral move if you think like in ADP, as long as you think, like I think, that he might have a little bit of a drop coming. Obviously they went, this is another team has 0 vacated targets. So it's almost a negative vacated targets when they bring in a guy like Stephon Diggs. They didn't lose anyone. They bring in a guy like Stephon Diggs in the offseason. And to me, to kind of solidify that offensive wide receiver core. I mean, now it's really easy to have Nico on one side, Stephon Diggs on the other, and now Tank Dell's in the slot. And that's kind of, it feels right. You know what I mean? Like that feels like it should as far as body types and all that kind of good stuff. Because one of the knocks on Tank Dell is he's 5'10", 165 pounds. And some guys, no big deal. And a guy like Tank Dell, he plays tougher than that size would indicate. And sometimes you think maybe his body needs to mature and he'll put on some pounds naturally. He's almost 25 years old. I'm not sure there's much more weight that's really going to naturally come onto a guy like Tank Dell. So with that being said, I just think he kind of goes down the pecking order one. We're talking about Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins. I think both those guys are just kind of better than him at this point. I mean, it's maybe a little bit of a toss-up between Nico and him, but still, he went from a guy that was at times the number one target when Nico was out and stuff like that last year to now he's like, at times he's going to be the second guy, but at other times he's going to be the third. And we're already not talking about a guy that was super consistent. If you look at his fantasy output last year, week 1, 6.4, week 2, 20.2, week 3, 25.5, week 4, 3.9, week 5, 8.3. Then he was injured. Then there was a bye, 6.1, 29.6, 18.9, 28.9, 17, and then he gets injured. So he was on a roll towards the end, but at the beginning of the year, it was a little bit of an up and down roller coaster. And for that to be a guy that people are considering as wide receiver 21, that's just a little bit high for me. Like I said, I like him, but it's just a little bit too much. So I think you can go out, and even if you make a lateral move, we mentioned when I was talking about our buys, there was guys around him like Jackson Smith and Jigba. There were, so Tank Dell is right after Zay Flowers, DJ Moore. And then there's T. Higgins is right after him. Jackson Smith and Jigba is right after him. Even Jordan Addison, a former first-round draft pick, is behind him as well. I know he's got, he's got Justin Jefferson there on the other side, but I still believe that is going to open things up for a second wide receiver. And long term, I would rather have a Jordan Addison than a Tank Dell. Me personally, I know there's going to be people that think I'm crazy. But who knows? I mean, they haven't even committed to Justin Jefferson long term, and now there's reports coming out that that they're kind of sending mixed signals to the best wide receiver in the NFL as to whether or not they want to sign him or not. So that would make Jordan Addison a huge bump if for whatever reason they didn't sign him and Justin Jefferson ended up, being traded away at all during this offseason or during the season.
Yeah, I was with you for sure on both the buys. This is the one that I struggle with the most because I'm with you on the other sell overall. I struggle with this one because when you, as a rookie, are able to come out and, yeah, it was a little bit of a roller coaster at times, but he's a rookie. You expect some of that, but in the games that he played, like before he got injured, he was healthy through week 12 there. And this isn't even on points per game basis. He was higher on points per game because he missed that one game. But he was wide receiver 14. And on a points per game basis, he was even higher than that because he was ahead of Pittman Jr., he was ahead of Devontae Adams, and he was ahead of Adam Thielen on a points per game basis. So, I mean, he was really, really good during his rookie campaign. And I know for most people, Stephon Diggs it spells bad news. And I understand that. Stephon Diggs is a very good wide receiver, but he is also going to be 31. He's not this young wide receiver anymore. It's a 1-year deal. So even when we're talking about a guy that we both agree we like and want to buy, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, worst case scenario, we're still just waiting 1 year, just like we are for that guy. And I don't know, like the injury, while I understand it, it was also like they decided to use him as a fullback. What are you doing? To me, that's like a fluky injury. It's totally weird. That kind of.
It was totally fluky. I agree with that. I doubt he'll be used in that capacity going forward. Especially,
I sure hope not.
Right. I think they probably would have learned their lesson. But don't forget that he's already running routes, but he's also got a gunshot wound that he's healing up from Iran. That's like totally an aside, because it sounds like everything's going to be fine with that.
Yeah.
And whatever. Who doesn't get shot every once in a while?
Right?
Club. I mean, come on. No big deal. So I don't know. There's nothing that like pops off and I'm like overly scared about it. I just think wide receiver 21 is just high for me because I think he's going to be a guy that settles in to a wide receiver, like a low end wide receiver 2 role, like in the future. I know there were some flashes of greatness, but I'm consider me not sold on him staying where he kind of lived for a short period of time over a long period. So that's how I see it anyway. I could be totally off base, but I would rather take shots on other guys.
And I get it. There are guys in his range that I think are pretty interesting. You mentioned Jordan Addison. I think that's the one for me where I would rather tank. It's a new quarterback in Minnesota, and as much as I think he could be a very good quarterback, you just don't know. Where we know CJ Stroud is that guy.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep.
We know he's a stud. They're going to be connected for a long time, and more than likely, assuming the Vikings are wise and make sure that they keep the best wide receiver in football on their team, he's more than likely going to be second or third for the most part, depending on where they're at with TJ Hawkinson as well. So yeah, for me, I'd rather have Tank Dell, but it's close. Zay Flowers is right in that same range. Those guys are kind of close. I get DJ Moore. I think they're all about the same. I'd rather have Tank, I think, over DK, over Rashee Rice, over, I don't know about T. Higgins. I'm torn on T. Higgins. That whole situation's weird, though. He still hasn't signed.
He hasn't signed. I think he's going to end up somewhere else, and I think he's going to end up being a low-end wide receiver 1 once he gets onto his own team where he can actually shine and be the man full-time. So I would much rather have T. Higgins than a Tank Dell, just because the upside to be the guy is there. Tank Dell, I don't think it's there for him. I think he's always going to be a second wide receiver on a team at best. And
I mean, I get
how does that,
but
how does that equate? How does that equate to long-term fantasy success? You can have a flash in the pan. You can have a year. You can have maybe one more year pop up somewhere else where you're sniffing wide receiver 1 numbers. But if you're taking him at 21 in a startup, it's because you think he's going to be the guy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's pretty high.
It is, but when they were together, he actually did outperform Nico Collins. Now, it wasn't this drastic difference. One was wide receiver 14 at 16.5 points, and Nico had 16 points and was wide receiver 17. So it's not like they were drastically different. But I mean, he was the number 1. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm with you on everything else. This was the one where I was like, I could go either way on it.
Understandable. This is a kind of a pick your flavor type of guy, and he's maybe less my flavor and more yours.
Yeah, I'm a Moose Tracks guy.
Okay, yeah. I'm a more of a mint chocolate chip. So.
I like mint chocolate chip too.
Yeah, mint chocolate chip's really good.
I like most ice creams, to be fair.
All right, let's start the list. Butter pecan. That's pretty good. That's probably my second.
See, for me, I'm not a big nuts guy, so especially in my ice cream. So I tend to avoid nuts in my ice cream for the most part. In general, whichever way you want to take that, I avoid nuts in my ice cream. But it would probably go Moose Tracks, then probably mint chocolate chip. I do like mint chocolate chip a lot. That would probably be second. Then cookie dough. Then I'm gonna have to think about it. Those are the top 3 for sure, though.
Give me a nice pistachio ice cream. Another.
So you're a big nuts in your ice cream guy.
Yep. Yes, I am, Garrett.
All right.
What of it?
Good. Just good to know. Just good to know for the future. If you're ever eating ice cream, I know that you're a nuts in your ice cream kind of guy. All right. So let's get back to ourselves. See, this feels more like a Rich Dotson show now. There we go.
Exactly.
All right.
Yep.
Next, and you're honored, Rich. Next sell, I'm gonna go with. Now, if you've been listening, you know that I have not been super high on this player, so this is pretty on brand for me. But I'm gonna go Puka Nacua here. I'm selling Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua, according to our ADP, is the wide receiver 7 off the board. We rank him a little bit lower than that personally, and I know I definitely rank him lower than that. And look, he burst onto the scene last year. First 2 games, 15 targets and 20 targets. Like, he was being absolutely force-fed the football, and to his credit, figured it out. Like, made it work and made plays. So, like, I don't want to take away. Like, that's the thing that's hard for me is I want to give flowers to the guy that, like, worked his butt off, was practically a 6th-round pick. He was the last pick of the 5th round. He was practically a 6th-round pick and made his way into the starting lineup week 1 and made something of it. Like, that's awesome. But at wide receiver 7, that scares me. It does. He was 6th overall in targets last year, but I don't expect him to be 6th in targets this year. Remember, like I said, he had 35 targets in the first 2 games without Cooper Kupp. He's not going to be getting 35 targets over a 2-game stretch.
And listen, I honestly don't think Cooper Kupp was right for most of the year. You know what I mean? Like, that's for me the biggest thing that scares me. And you mentioned right before the show, hey, these are the guys I did, and Puka was on your list, and I was like, listen, I think that's a great one. This is a great sell. Just based off of those 2 little things, the fact that I think he's way too high, and he's got nowhere to go but kind of down, in my opinion. But sorry, I cut you off. Another Rich Dotson.
Tip of the hat.
Like tip.
But and like you said, ADP wise, looking at guys that would be going after him ADP wise, just at the wide receiver position, not even other positions, because Sam Laporta is the one right after him. Like in a tight end premium, give me Sam Laporta over him all day and twice on Sundays. But just wide receivers, AJ Brown's going after him. I'd rather have AJ Brown. Malik Neighbors, I'd rather have Malik Neighbors. Tyreek Hill is close. I would probably, I think I'd rather Puka, but it's close.
I'd rather Puka
then,
in that instance, just because there's
age.
such a short time frame for Tyreek Hill. I mean, if you were like, I'm for sure gonna be building a win now team, and you were in a startup, I would go. Oh God, you can't even. I would say I would go Tyreek in a win now. Like if I knew I was doing win now builds from the beginning,
sure.
Then I would do Tyreek, but that would be the only way. Only way.
I'm with you. And then Jalen Waddle, I'd rather have Jalen Waddle. And so for me, he falls in like the Drake London, Brandon Ayuk. Like he falls more in that range for me, which is more like wide receiver 12, 13, 14. Like that's where I feel more comfortable with a guy like that. And I've said it before too. I have some concerns long term. It's not just the short term with Cooper Kupp. Long term, you have a brilliant offensive mind and a really good quarterback. I know he's old and he's not exciting for dynasty anymore, but NFL wise, Matt Stafford is still absolutely a baller. He took that abysmal offense to the playoffs last year. So he is still a very good quarterback. And just like they resurrected Robert Woods' career, just like, honestly, Cooper Kupp is probably a good receiver. I don't know that he's CeeDee Lamb and
for sure,
Justin Jefferson, like those guys at the top, but he plays that role in that scheme perfectly. So if it were to be a situation where McVay is gone and one of his disciples is not the head coach, does that change things? Probably. So that's the thing for me. It's not like a sell Puka Nacua at all costs. It's not like a, I don't like this player or anything like that. It's just, there's too many yellow flags, not red flags. There's too many yellow flags for me. Last note I had, I forgot to mention, after his like incredible start, once Cooper Kupp came back, he had 4 games below 8 points, and over half of his games were below 14 points. So yes, he had some like really big games in there, but he did become more inconsistent once Cooper Kupp came back as well, which is something to keep an eye on.
And really, they kind of cannibalized each other, right? Because it became hard to rely on Cooper Kupp as well towards, when he did get back, he wasn't as consistent either. And really, you feast or famine on things like that. And that's not what you're used to. If you have a guy like Cooper Kupp, it was all feast for years, so a guy like Puka, while if he was the guy and Cooper Kupp was off this team, for whatever reason, I mean, Cooper Kupp's 30. If he was off this team and all the pieces were in place, I think it might warrant this type of 7th pick. But Cooper Kupp is there. He's not gone. He's not going anywhere this year either. And like you said, if and when either Matt Stafford or the head coach go, there could be a drastic shift in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp's values. I mean, Cooper Kupp obviously is playing on the back nine of his career at 30 years old, so it won't be as drastic for him because there's going to be a natural decline there anyway. But for Puka, 7 might be his high water mark if things kind of fall apart rapidly here in LA. But I wanted to touch on something real quick because you had mentioned a guy that I kind of thought about, in this whole process, in Drake London. Where do you see a guy like that? I mean, for me, he's obviously going to be in a better situation, but I'm just not sure if I trust him 100%. Well, how do you feel about Drake London? Is he a buy for you? Is he a sell for you? How do you feel just in general?
I think at this point he's become a hold, which I know sounds like a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I think the price has gotten to a point where I need a guy to have proven that he can be that kind of guy, and he hasn't proven that yet. But I also am not actively looking to sell because I've seen signs that he can be that guy, and I know Desmond Ridder was just not a good quarterback. Right. And Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. And long-term, they have their contingency plan in place. So you're going to assume he's going to get pretty good quarterback play for the remainder of his career. So that's the tough part for me is I don't feel strongly enough one way or another to really say he's a buy or a sell. He's just kind of right in that same range as Puka Nacua, that 12 to 14, right on the fringe of being a wide receiver one kind of guy.
Okay. I've never been a huge Drake London guy. Mm-hmm. But I have to admit, like, his situation has gotten markedly better. So I'm struggling internally, which is why I wanted to kind of get your feelings on how you saw Drake London, because I kind of don't know what to do with him. So your answer as a hold wasn't much of a cop out, because that's almost how I feel. I'm not going out and trying to acquire him. I don't have any shares of him, but I'm interested to see what happens with him. And I'm keeping a very close eye on it. And so I just don't know. I'm almost like doing like a market study on Drake London in my own brain. You know what I mean? And not only a market study, but did I miss something somewhere in my process where I've been kind of lower on this guy? Because as of right now, I haven't. But there are those factors, like the quarterback play wasn't great, and there was things. So now I'm going to get a true indicator of did I mess something up in my process when I evaluated, or is he just a good but not great wide receiver? Like, is he a dime a dozen type of guy, or is he going to ascend and become a bona fide wide receiver one? And so I'm super curious about him, just to kind of see how he does this year.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. There's a scenario where you're like, oh, maybe he ended up just being Courtland Sutton. That sucks. Or maybe he's like the real deal and we get a top 8 season out of him this year.
Right. I think Courtland Sutton's a perfect example of what he could be if he doesn't hit. Like, he's still good and he's still usable. Yeah. He's not that Mike Evans. You know what I mean? He's not the next Mike Evans. So those are the kind of ranges I see for him, and I kind of always saw him as the Courtland Sutton. We'll see if he ascends and becomes that Mike Evans type of guy this year, I guess. All right.
Nice. All right. Who you got?
Let me get off that sidetrack that I was on and get back on the rails here.
Hey, Dynasty Nerds, it's time to take your Dynasty game to the next level with FFPC's Dynasty Startup Leagues. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, FFPC has a league for you, with entry fees ranging from $100 up to $5,000. Choose from a variety of formats, including Superflex, Best Ball Superflex, Triflex, 1QB, and Standard. With weekly lineups, waivers, trades, head-to-head matchups, and playoffs, FFPC's fully managed leagues provide the ultimate dynasty experience. Most importantly, the leagues are here to stay. FFPC has never had a dynasty league fold. They manage the entire commissioner experience, from buy-in management to fulfilling your orphans. FFPC is perfect place to expand your dynasty league portfolio. And here's the best part. As a Dynasty Nerds listener, you can get $25 off any entry fee as a new member when you use the promo code NERDS. Head over to myffpc.com now to draft your team, manage your roster, and dominate your league with FFPC. That's myffpc.com. Promo code NERDS for $25 off any entry fee for new members. FFPC, where dynasty dreams become a reality.
So my next guy, you teased it, right? That maybe a couple of my guys were linked, and they are. So my next sell is Chris Olave, and this is another guy that, listen, I don't dislike Chris Olave. I've never been super high on him, but I don't dislike him. I think he's a fine player. But right now, currently going off the board, 30th overall. maybe 30th or 31st. 30.6 is his ADP. But wide receiver 10, he's the 10th wide receiver off the board. And, he's 23, he'll be 24. So there's no age concerns there at all. But last year he was wide receiver 20, 21 on a points per game basis. So there wasn't much of a difference there. I think he had a pretty ideal situation last year. It's not like he missed a bunch of games or didn't, there wasn't any of that. He just ended up settling in as wide receiver 20. I just think the passing attack was somewhat limited, maybe in Derek Carr's first year there. Maybe he'll do more this year. Who knows? But there was the loss of Michael Thomas in the offseason, which really just makes it easier for teams to bracket him. You know what I mean? Like if you lose a guy like him and then you're replacing him with a guy that I like, Rashid Shaheed and A.T. Perry, you're going to pay less attention to those guys, which is kind of why I like them, and more attention to a guy like Chris Olave. So I just think you're going to be a little bit disappointed in what you get from a player when he's coming off the board as wide receiver 10. And last year in a pretty ideal situation, he only got to wide receiver 20 numbers. And the odd thing when I was digging into these numbers, and I was looking at a lot of weird kind of stats and everything like that, and fantasydata.com had Olave only had a 59.3% snap share, which ranked 77th, which I thought was really kind of odd. And then he had a routes run percentage, which was 33.7, which ranked 19th, which kind of told me, I'm like, how the hell does that even happen? And to me, they're pulling him off the field. They have to be pulling him off the field in obvious run situations and kind of almost highlighting him in pass only situations, which got me thinking, like, why the heck would you do that unless you're just trying to conserve a guy? And if a guy is durable and bona fide wide receiver 1, you would want him on the field all the time. I couldn't make sense of this in my brain. I don't know if you've got something on that. It was just such an odd situation for me.
The only other thing I could think with that would be, is he that bad at run blocking? Like, is he that poor of a run blocker that they feel like they can't have him on the field?
Which very well could be. I mean, was it the fact that maybe he didn't have, like, he was getting nicked up a lot, right? His rookie year and maybe his second year, he was getting a lot of little dings and bruises and those kind of things that were slowing him down. And that just raises a whole nother set of red flags, yellow flags, orange flags. They're like orange. They're more than yellow, all right? But they're not red.
They're not full red.
He's a good player. But my orange flags are like, why are they pulling him off the field? Why are they doing this kind of stuff to conserve a guy? If he's your number one guy, he should be on the field all the time. Even if he's just out there drawing coverage away from a run that's going the opposite way, something, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Unless there's I don't know. I just don't know, but I feel like something doesn't add up there. And for him to be going as wide receiver 10 when his production is closer to it's wide receiver 20 in an already ideal situation where he's getting 33% of the routes run, blah, 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 like it's 19th ranked. He's by far in a way the best on his team in that category, but he's not on the field all the time. It was something didn't add up. It felt weird. I've never been a guy that like went way out on a limb for Chris Olave because I think he does have some weird kind of I'll just say it, softness to his game. I just don't think he plays tough in some situations. So I think you're just going to be disappointed. And if you can get wide receiver 10 return for a guy like Chris Olave, I think now's the time to kind of do it before either Rashid Shaheed hits or A.T. Perry develops, or they go out and just get another guy that they can have on the field all the time. And then all of a sudden, Chris Olave is slotted in as that really, really good second wide receiver in an offense, which I think is within the range of outcomes for a guy like that. So wide receiver 10 return, I think I would cash in on that personally.
Yeah, no, we're in lockstep on this one. And he does kind of just fall into this range of wide receivers where I don't want, similar to Puka Nacua, I don't want to draft the beginning of that tier because I just don't think most of the beginning of that tier is all that much better than guys that could be taken 10, 11, 12 wide receiver spots later. Like, see that much better than Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman Jr., all guys that are be taking, like, these are wide receiver 16, 17, 18. Like, I just don't, DJ Moore, who's after that? Like, yeah, I just don't think he's that much better than those guys. So I think for me, it comes down to a strategy thing, like when I'm drafting and even when I'm trading, like there's just nothing special about him. And even though like his numbers weren't bad, his numbers just weren't amazing either. And he never had that week. And granted, it's a little bit unfair because sometimes we talk about guys not being consistent enough. And I'm going to kind of go on the opposite side of this here because he was decently consistent. He had a few like real bummer games, a 1.4, 9.2, a 9.6, 5.6. So, I mean, he did have some bummer games under double digits, but he never had a boom game. Like he never had a game where it was like, man, that guy carried me that week, where you look at every other receiver that's in the top 20. They have at least one or two games where they're like, yeah, that guy carried me that week. Like he had a huge game. No, he really didn't ever have any big games. He had go ahead.
If you're drafting a guy as wide receiver 10, you have to have some big games. You want to be consistent throughout,
right,
and still not have a lot of bummer games, but you want to have a few spike games, maybe one or two at least, where it's just like, this guy won me my week. This was great. And then every other week, it's just like you're filling in nicely as my high-end wide receiver 2. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Right.
At least a wide receiver 2 to be able to kind of justify the top 10 status at wide receiver. If you're taking him that high, he has to have more juice, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. But the last thing I'll say with all of this is just looking at not even just the wide receivers around him, but just the players around him in general. We have a lot of quarterbacks in Superflex tight end premium that I would rather have. Dak Prescott's going right after him. Tua's going right after him. But then we have a bunch of receivers, some tight ends. I would probably at this point, it's close between him and Jonathan Taylor, who I'd rather have. Taking a running back. I know early is tough in a startup, but there's only so many good running backs to go around. So I think that's the last straw for me, is just, it's not even just the receivers in that range. There's just a lot of other players in that range that I like just as much, if not more. So, yeah.
Hey, guys, let me tell you about our friends at Sleeper. Guess what? Our app the mini is live on Sleeper right now. The Dynasty GM, pretty. You can use the analyzer. You can use the trade calculator. And my favorite thing is the inbox, right? Where all your trades from all your Sleeper leagues are right there. You can actually push trades through the actual Sleeper app. And right now, we could be more excited to be partners with them. And right now, if you don't know, they are doing DFS. And I know how many people that play Dynasty play DFS as well. And right now, there's not a better place to play DFS than Sleeper. They're offering up to 100 times your entry, the highest payout in the whole DFS market right now. You can track your fantasy players and your Sleeper picks in real time. All you got to do is choose 2 to 8 of your favorite players from pregame, live in-game, or even across different sports. Pick more or less than the predicted stats, and only on Sleeper you can get up to 100 times your payout. You can share it with your friends and get rewarded together. Make sure you use that promo code NERD so our friends know that friends sent them their way. And get your deposit match and have a good time. Have all your DFS, all of your fantasy leagues, and now even a Dynasty GM in one spot. It is fully operational inside Sleeper right now. And then when you're a Nerd Herd member, you get that full access to that. And remember, you also want to download the Dynasty Nerds app because they're both in there. Check it out. Check our friend Sleeper. Check out our DFS. Use that promo code NERDS.
Get your whole estate.
Last one for me. I did it last week, but I did it on a buy. Now I'm doing it on a sell this week, and I threw a rookie in again.
Oh my
I
God.
couldn't help
Look
myself.
You're selling a rookie already.
I've already sold a rookie, which feels more right because usually rookies are overhyped, like as rookies. So that one
True.
feels a little bit better than like selling a rookie, but still feels weird. But I'm doing it anyway, and I don't care. Keon Coleman. I am selling Keon Coleman. And look, there is probably the best TikTok video we've done to date is a short where I talk about why I don't like Keon Coleman. And it has over 200,000 views and 500 comments. And 90% of them are people just absolutely ripping into me as
Bills
to why
Mafia,
I'm an
dude.
Oh, I am an idiot. I mean, the comps that this guy got on these TikTok comments is hilarious. We saw Jerry Rice. We saw
Ooh.
little DK Metcalf. We saw Larry Fitzgerald. The comments were just, a thing of beauty. A thing of beauty. Then somebody said he's exactly like Gabe Davis, which I have no idea how he got that idea. But all of that being said, look, Keon Coleman is a player that I really like in a specific scenario, in a specific situation. And the coaching staff for the Buffalo Bills have already come out and said that he's going to be playing on the outside.
Well, hold on.
And-
What is that specific situation in case somebody didn't hear it?
Okay. The specific situation for me is the opposite of being on the outside because especially on a team where there's no good passing options in this receiving core. And as much as I like Khalil Shakir, I think he's a very talented young player. He's
How
still
dare
very
you.
unproven and very raw. It's Khalil Shakir, it's Curtis Samuel Jr., and like then it's all of the wide receivers that time forgot that ever were hyped on Dynasty Twitter. It's Mac Hollins is on there. We've got Chase Claypool on there. Andy Isabella's on there. Quintez Cephas is there. Like every formerly hyped wide receiver that didn't pan out is currently on the Buffalo Bills.
Didn't Cephas get cut already?
Probably.
I think
Feels
he did.
right. Feels right.
I'm breaking news. If
Breaking
you
news.
didn't, I'm breaking it for 3 months from now. When
O'Hara
when he
Shefty
gets-
over here. All of that being said, they're saying he's going to play on the outside, which means he will not line up in the slot. And why that concerns me is when we were doing our breakdown of him, we said, man, this guy has some really solid hands. He can go up and get the football, uses his body well, like stuff that we really like. What we're struggling with is he has a poor release off the line. He's not a great route runner and separator. When you have number one corners, it's tough to separate on number one corners, even as a good route runner and a person with a good release. If you do not have that, you're going to be locked up all day long. So you would have to consistently get thrown contested catches. And he actually, even though there are times we saw him do that really well, the metrics told us that he was much lower than a lot of other players in this class as far as being successful in contested catch situations. So I do not want to see him on the outside against number one corners. I want to see him in the slot playing that big slot role. And if anybody were to do that on this team, and it wasn't Shakir playing out of the slot, and it wasn't Curtis Samuel playing out of the slot, it would be Dalton Kincaid playing the big slot role. So that's the thing. Like, it's just not going to happen for Keon Coleman there. And so he's going to have to develop as a true X. I don't see that as a likely scenario in his range of outcomes. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. But I feel like there was also a reason that the Buffalo Bills kept trading down, because they weren't worried about anybody taking Coleman. They're like, yeah, we'll just get him there. We like him, but nobody else is going to take him. We'll just get him there. that doesn't feel like a team that prioritized a player. Whereas the Panthers moved up to get Leggett. The Chiefs moved up to get Xavier Worthy. Bill's like, we'll just trade down and give us whoever's left, and I don't know. All of that spells trouble for me. Look, he seems like a great kid. He's hilarious in interviews, but I don't like the situation at all. And when you look at some of the other receivers in his range, specifically the rookies, give me Ricky Pearsall that's coming after him. Give me Xavier Leggett that's coming after him. Give me the rookie running back Trey Benson going after him. There's a lot of guys going after him, both in rookie drafts and in startup drafts, that I would much rather have.
All right, let me ask you this: if you were a defensive coordinator and you're playing the Buffalo Bills, would you put your number one guy on Coleman, or would you maybe if the guy was able to move in and do some inside stuff, would you just go ahead and put it right on Dalton Kincaid? I mean, I think towards the end of the season, we saw him kind of emerging as the number one option there in the offense. If it were me, I might be tempted to do that if I was the defensive coordinator, just to shut that thing down. And I would see Coleman on the outside and be like, I think we can handle him. I think anyone can get, really doesn't have to be our number one guy. I think if anyone gets their hands on him at the line, it's probably enough to disrupt him and kind of do our thing. I'm with you there. I'm just kind of trying to figure out like the nuts and bolts of it. Maybe he'll end up getting the second guy, but it still might not be to his advantage, because he'll be up on the line of scrimmage. So a lot of times, the slot, you're able to drop those guys back a little bit. They play off the line of scrimmage, and maybe the release won't matter quite as much. The X's are usually up there on the line, so it's harder to hide. I guess
it is, and while that's a possibility. Often, outside corners tend to stay outside. You have a few guys that will just shadow the top receiver. So there might be a few cases where that happens, but even then, you don't see it as much on the tight ends. Usually, you'll see them, like if it's an elite tight end, you'll see double coverage with the safety kind of drop down. Often, the top corner won't move inside, but maybe they would. Maybe it's a scenario where they switch things up and take a look at that.
There were times when, we definitely saw Kelsey when they didn't have anyone else. There was times where Kelsey was getting the top corner because he was just the best option in the offense. And I right now, Kincaid probably is the best option in that offense.
Probably.
As far as receiving. So I don't know. We might see some goofy stuff happen there. Maybe Coleman gets then a little bit easier of a go, in some weeks. Who knows? Something that popped in my head while you were talking. I mean, it's not something I really thought out or anything, so I just figured I'd get your thoughts on it.
No. I think that makes perfect sense. So for you, who would you rather have? Would you rather have Pearsall and Leggett? Would you rather have Trey Benson, or would you rather have like Keon Coleman?
No, I have all those guys ahead of Keon Coleman, so I would for sure take them. I think he actually, you said you were going to do a rookie, and I wasn't sure who the heck you were going to do, but it makes perfect sense to me because I do think his ADP is a lot higher than I would feel comfortable taking him. So if you can kind of flip that and get out from underneath a guy that maybe has a lot of perceived value. Before they even step on the field and see him play. For people that studied the film on these players, we maybe see some of the flaws that people that are just follow the draft and they're excited because this guy got picked early and it's to a team that has an obvious need there. Sometimes you can connect dots that maybe aren't there. You know what I mean? When you're just doing it in that process, but we see all the dots and we're trying to kind of say, hey, there's a gap here. You know what I mean? These two dots, they don't go together. they're too far apart. They're offline. Hopefully people can take that and see that. We're not trying to be overcritical. There are definitely things that both of us like about him, but maybe it's just not in the best situation for him to succeed right now in Buffalo. So it might be a hard go, especially at the beginning. We'll see. I mean, who knows? Guys outperform all the time. What we
for
think,
sure.
But I think
Yeah.
you and I are kind of seeing eye to eye here as far as Coleman just being a guy that's overvalued right now.
Yeah. And yeah, wish the kid nothing but the best. Hope he does well. I don't, not rooting for people to fail, but it just is one of those things where we got to have guys where we get value on them, and I think this is a chance where we could get a little bit of value. So that wraps up our sell show, and we will be back next week. Let me see. I can tell you exactly what we're doing next week. Next
Quarterback
week,
and tight ends.
Quarterback and tight ends. I didn't even have to look. I should have known. Quarterback and tight end buys and sells for next week's episode. So we will be back then with the illustrious Rich Dotson.
Adios.